Well, for those who don't know me, my name is Melissa, and I am the scientific program coordinator of the International Conference of Physics Students Puebla 2022. And it's a great pleasure for me to introduce our invited panelists for our EDI panel discussion today. We are waiting for our first panelist, which is Raquel Heredia, so I'll let her join us in a bit. But here we have our second panelist, Dr. Sekar Chibukula. He's a distinguished professor in physics in the UC San Diego Department of Physics. He received his PhD from Harvard University in 1987. Subsequently, he was a postdoctoral fellow and then faculty member at Boston University. He moved to Michigan State University in 2003, where he served as associate provost for undergraduate education and dean of undergraduate students. He joined the UC San Diego Physics Department in 2018. Chibukula's research focuses on the theory of electroweak symmetry breaking and on the phenomenological implications of theories beyond the standard model of particle physics. He teaches both at the graduate and undergraduate level, and he is committed to creating an inclusive environment for all students and to incorporating active learning in all his classes. He has served on and as a chair of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committees for the UCSD Physics Department and the Division of Physical Sciences. He currently serves as chair-elect of the Division of Particles and Fields of the American Physical Society. Our next panelist is Mario de Leo Winkler. He has a PhD in astrophysics from the National Autonomous University of Mexico. He was a postdoctoral scholar, instructor, and science engager at the University of California, as well as a coordinator and director of the NASA Science Education project called Fields at the same institution. In the Mexican National Council of Sciences, he was appointed director of the National System of Researchers and Scientific Vocations. He currently heads the Directorship on Communication of Knowledge at the Metropolitan Autonomous University of Mexico. His research and peer-reviewed publications are on the subjects of astrophysics, informal methods of science education, and science for underrepresented communities, especially the deaf, justice, involved youth, and economically vulnerable groups. Our next panelist is Rodrigo Vasquez. They is a non-binary and vegan nanotechnologist. They are a workshop facilitator for gender equality and non-violence and an engineering student in sustainable project management and circular economy. Their ikigai or purpose in life is to positively influence others to organize and lead projects that work with LGBTIQ+ communities, science popularization, gender perspective, and promote environmental care. Last but not least, our final panelist is Atlas Barsted. They are from the Niels Bohr Institute, where they helped organize a Women at Niels Bohr Historical Conference, and they are currently studying a master's in computational physics. I don't know if Raquel has joined us. I'm going to introduce her in case she joins us in a bit. I hope she does. So Raquel is a sustainable development engineering with a focus on nuclear energy for the ITESM Campus Santa Fe in Mexico. She also holds a master's in arts in development studies from the Institute of Development Studies in the UK. Currently, she works as a program manager of the World Nuclear University, a global network committed to enhancing international education and training in leadership and peaceful applications of nuclear science and technology. The WNU program intends to address the main challenges facing the world today. Raquel has transdisciplinary professional background, having worked for private companies in the energy and construction sectors, NGOs, and research institutions. She has also undertaken entrepreneurial consulting and advocacy activities. Through these various roles, she has developed comprehensive skills in nuclear communications, project management, development, and leadership. She is the founder and president of the Women in Nuclear Mexico chapter, the regional representative for Mexico in the North America Youth Generation Network, the communications lead in the Women in Nuclear Global Young Generation Group, and an active member of the Women in Nuclear Global Communications. Additionally, she is the co-chair of the Voices of Nuclear International Development and promotional lead for the Nuclear for Climate COP27 delivery team. And without further ado, please join me in welcoming our panelists, and let's go straight to the proposed questions. Okay, so I'm sharing my screen right now. I'm going to start my presentation here. So as I mentioned before, welcome everyone to the Equity, Inclusion, and Diversity panel discussion. I will be moderating the discussion, the panel discussion, and sorry. So here are our panelists, and let me just explain the instructions. So that reminds me that I had to, wait, just give me a second. I'm gonna show a timer in my, just give me 1 second. Let me explain. So there are a few proposed questions by the moderators, so by me. So the panelists already know these questions. There are some previously proposed questions by the students via social media. I think we have a couple of them saved. But the live audience can send their questions via chat. Each speaker has 3 minutes to give their answer. Okay, so we have 2 hours for the panel, and we will try to answer all the questions. But if needed, we will have to end before. And let me just check that everything's good. So people can see, yeah. You can see like a tiny timer, right? Where my image is, or yes, no?
I'm not sure I can see it, I'm sorry.
We can, it's on the top left of her screen.
For some reason, it's not showing up to me, but I'll try to stay on time.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can, if you cannot see it, like I can just.
Sorry, I was looking in the wrong place, on the top of your screen, of your image.
Yeah, of my image, sorry. Okay, cool. Then let's reset here. Okay. So let's start with the first question. So the first question here is, what is your definition of diversity and what does it mean to you? Let's start with Atlas.
Okay. I mean, this is an easy and a hard question, I guess. It means many things. It's both diversity in countries, and ethnicity, and skin color, and gender, and sexuality, and everything, really. There's a lot of things that goes into diversity, but also just all groups that are different from your own, or that you're different from in one way or another. Yeah, I think it's a very broad definition, I guess. But yeah. But I think it's important to have as much diversity and inclusion as possible, which is kind of weird because I live in a very not very diverse country, to say the least. It's very white and very straight. So it's it depends on where you live, I guess. Also, what diversity means to you. Because when I lived in Canada, there was a lot more cultural, like a lot more different cultures in one place, which meant that diversity was things that were different from what already existed in the group or the area that you lived in, which if you live in Victoria, Canada, there's a huge population of immigrants from East Asia, but they've been there for 50, 100 years, so they're no longer as sort of different from the rest of the population in Canada, that it's sort of a new diversity, as if a bunch of people moved to Denmark, which is a very white country, where diversity is relatively new. So I think it depends on time and location and a lot of factors. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, and then let's hear Dr. Mario De Leo answer.
Yeah, with pleasure. So I believe, and I'm going to go a little bit Star Trek on this side, that infinite combinations are what make diversity and enrich the universe. And it's the merger of positions and ideas that allow for multiple solutions to multiple situations. I mean, just having a diverse group of whatever, it can be people, ideas, things, enriches. That's it. But diversity exists if and only if racism, classism, and discrimination can be uprooted. And I'm going to talk about this later, in the sense that diversity has existed for a long time, but it has been with hierarchy, it has been produced and valued in a globalized world without creating equality. So institutions promote and invite diverse communities to participate within their academic bodies. But once inside, those diverse communities continue having discrimination, segregation, lack of proper workplace conditions, income disparity, and the law is not applied equally. So if those changes don't happen, if equality is not established, then we don't have real diversity. That's what I want to say. And for example, just to put an example on how, for example, the laws and the bodies in a country don't work for everyone. They mostly work for minorities that have power. In Mexico, 94% of criminal cases remain unpunished, 94%. And the people that have access to the law and making the law work for them are the ones that have money, that have power, that do corrupt acts. And there's still this racism and classism that impose barriers for different groups to be included, heard, and treated as equals. I would leave it at that.
Okay, thank you for your answer. I do agree with what you said. So let's move with Dr. Chibukla's answer.
Thank you, Melissa, and thank you for inviting me on this panel. I certainly agree with what my co-panelists have said so far. So I think what I would add is that at least in the United States, we try to distinguish between diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think it's important I think that's also some of what Dr. Mario De Leo was mentioning, that we need to actually address not just diversity, which could be measured by, say, numerically understanding whether different categories of individuals are represented appropriately or proportionately in science or in physics, but also addressing the issues of equity and inclusion. Equity, I think, goes to what Dr. Leo was saying about trying to to have equal, to get toward equality, but equity doesn't necessarily mean equal in the same way. Equity means allowing or empowering or enabling people to fulfill their their potential without necessarily just giving into the situation or their conditions as they initially come, say, to a university, but to really to enable people to, you may need to provide support to different people in order for them to succeed. That doesn't mean you have to treat everyone equally, but you need to enable or empower everyone to be able to succeed. So equity is a second component that I think needs to be included along with diversity. And finally, inclusion, to me at least, is sort of our ultimate goal. I think that's what equality was, I think, the way Dr. DeLeo mentioned it. That we want to be able to create a situation in physics where all people who are interested and are eventually able, as they can, to really fulfill their potential and to be able to contribute to physics. And to me, that's an important part of being a scientist. It's an important part. It's healthy for our profession. It's healthy for the future of our profession, and it's just morally the correct thing to do. So I would add that to the discussion. Thanks.
Thank you for your answer. So now let's move to hear Rodrigo's answer.
Okay, thank you, Melissa. And well, it's a pleasure to be sharing this space with all of you. In my case, I will add these 4 dimensions that I like to mention. Maybe it's too close to my field, that it's the 4 dimensions of sexuality. No, it's the sexual orientation, the gender identity, gender expression, and sex. We have to make or to be clear that these 4 dimensions are different and that they do not interfere one with the other. No, I can be I don't know, a male that was born as a male, but I can identify as a non-binary person, that is my case, and I can be attracted to, I don't know, to a lot of different genders. And it doesn't mean that I have to be, I don't know, like painting my nails or using makeup or these things. It's I like to define the diversity as these multiple characteristics that we can identify to ourselves, and also that we can express all these diversity. This is what makes people, everyone, we are different in these ways. And I would like to, well, I always like to make this example that imagine we have these 4 I don't know, characteristics, but each of them has different varieties. And so we have a lot of combinations of people, and that's why it is important to know these basic 4 dimensions in order to start understanding what is happening with our sexuality. So that's what I would like to add, like this theoretical approach of what diversity in the specific field of sexuality is, well, what we like to talk about. And that's what I will add. I'm completely agree with the participations that were before me. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for your answer. I would like to ask now Raquel Heredia to answer question number 1.
Thank you so much, Melissa, and thank you, everyone. I'm sorry I was a bit delayed. I've run as fast as I could to be here, and I had some audio issues, so I apologize if there is some background noise. So in terms of my definition of diversity and what does it mean to you, I think The other panelists have given really complete answers. What I could add to this is the part of like we have, for me, diversity is considering that people have a lot of particularities and dimensions to themselves. Like we have to consider the intersectionality of people. So I can be a woman, but I'm also racialized, but I can also be in the dimension of like maybe some educational spectrum. There is differences to everyone, and we have to consider them, actually work into integrate them and to celebrate them as well, because that's part of what makes us unique and gives us a unique perspective that we can integrate into our work, into our interactions with others. So those are kind of some of the key points, and have that representation. It's not only about integrating people, but also showing that there is these different people and that we all have our uniqueness, and showing that into our work, into all of the areas that we have. So other people might have a reflection on this and can see themselves on this, and then they aspire to become either scientists or whatever part they want. But we need to have representation and consider the intersectionality of people.
Great, thank you all for your answers. I would like to ask our participants if they have any questions. Please feel free to hit with your questions using the chat. Okay. Okay, let's move on to question number 2. What is the current state of equity, diversity, and inclusion in academia and the world of science? I would like to start with Dr. Mario De Leo's answer.
Yes, of course. So first I want to make a point, and then I would like to talk about the current state. I know that equity and diversity and inclusion are different, but I think they're more or less at the same state worldwide. I do believe firmly that there are benefits in affirmative action and in positive discrimination. And I think that we need to spread them into wider worldwide and introduce them where they do not currently exist. Statistics show, and I understand that minority underrepresented groups are populating academia and peer-reviewed publications thanks to affirmative actions. But this is uneven worldwide, and while strides have been made, in particular in the United States, Canada, some parts of Europe, and Argentina in particular in Latin America, it's mostly missing worldwide, including in Mexico. So norms and bylaws still need to change. They need to change in institutions, they need to change in governments. And we need to put role models where they're widely seen by citizens. We need to take action where there's sexual harassment. We need to investigate sexual harassment. We need to avoid eclipsing minority groups, segregation. We need to stop ignoring women in science and when they accuse some kind of sexual harassment. And we need to reduce the wage gap. And then only if all of that is done, then we can talk about equity, inclusion, and reaching it diversely at institutions. So I think it's case by case in every single institution. Even within an institution, it's very particular for a department. And there's still strides to be done, but I think at a base level, we still have to work everything else out to be able to talk about equity, diversity, and inclusion.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mario, for your answer. So now let's move on to Rodrigo's answer.
Okay, thank you. Well, in my case, I have been working in the National Autonomous University of Mexico, and I think that, well, I have read that in other countries, in the UK, Ireland, obviously in the United States, the inclusion in STEM areas it has been working. They have been working with these topics from 30 years, 40 years ago, no? But in Mexico, last month, in June 28th, it was published the first diagnosis in the National Autonomous University of Mexico. That is the biggest university here in our country. And I think that we are, as Mexico, as a country, we are way back than other countries in these topics, especially in science and technology, no? So, well, in other countries, these studies have shown that people that are identified as LGBTIQ plus communities, they are, well, they don't like to share this with their peers or with their professors, with their classmates even, because this there is a lot of harassment, a lot of violence still. So I think the main topics that we have to do in academia is always being in diagnosis and sensitivity, because we have to always share our stories in order that other people that they haven't grown with this diversity pretty close to them, we have to show them how to collaborate, how to even say hello to another person, because we are not this kind of sensitive with them, no? And also to diagnose, because every university or every laboratory is different from other, no? So we have to know which problems we have in each space, and to propose these strategic I don't know, activities in order to make this inclusion in these spaces. So it's always, we have to focus in diagnosis and sensitivity. That's what I will add. Thank you.
Thank you. So let's move on to hear Dr. Chibucula's answer.
Thank you. I certainly agree with what my co-panelists have already said. So let me see what I can add. I should say that my perspective is largely from the point of view of the United States. It's what I'm familiar with, and the point of view from which I will speak. I am very interested to hear what the other panelists say about Mexico and other countries as well. In the United States, the current state of equity, diversity, and inclusion in physics is poor, I would say, in the sense that the population of physicists, professional physicists, is largely male in terms of gender, largely white or Asian in terms of ethnicity, predominantly straight in terms of gender orientation, and physically able, as opposed to having a more diverse set of physical abilities, and so the problem, and I think we'll come to this more as we talk about more of the questions, is that sort of determines who feels empowered, who feels comfortable, who feels able to speak, who is in power, as Dr. Maria de Leo would say, in physics. And the implicit assumption, I think, mostly unconscious, I suspect, is that a physicist will be from those four categories. We spoke about intersectionality. It's the intersectionality of those four that is the standard sort of assumption about physicists, and that means that people who have diverse characteristics relative to those may not feel comfortable, may not be accepted, may not be valued in their contribution to physics. So while it is true that in the United States, perhaps we have been discussing these issues for the last 20 or 30 years, I would say we have made remarkably little progress in many ways. For example, the statistics that I'm aware of in terms of gender equality, for example, women have constituted roughly 20% of professional physicists for the last 15 to 20 years. That figure has stayed remarkably stable. It has not deviated much in one way or another. Certainly has not grown to 50% in any way, shape, or form. In terms of ethnic diversity, it is quite low. The population, for example, the number of physicists getting PhDs who are African American in any given year can number in less than 10 or a dozen in a year. So that's much less than would be proportionate. And I say I'm running out of time, so I should let some of my other panelists speak.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so let's read it in here. Yeah, thank you for your answer. So now let's move to hear Raquel's answer.
Thank you, Gio. I agree as well with what has been said, and particularly in the case with Mario, that we need to see it case by case, and that doesn't mean only in terms of country, but also in terms of organization, and even like in topics, because it's really different what we see in some like physics, in some fields like physics, and that what we see in other that are more traditionally considered are feminine areas or certain areas. You know, the diversity comes in different ways, so we really have to consider that aspect. And also I agree in the sense that we haven't made the progress we need in terms of inclusion and diversity in academia and the world of science, because we also see if people are getting more integrated in certain positions, we have to look at which positions are they getting integrated in more decision-making areas, in areas where they can manage teams, and also which is the production of the work they're doing. You know, we saw this a big drawback during the pandemic, that, for example, in the case of women, they weren't able to be as productive in terms of papers and research as their male counterparts, because they had a lot of caring responsibilities, and that's still a really unbalanced world, which puts the whole caring into one gender or one area of the household, and the other one is not taking as much of this workload, and that impacts the output of work, that impacts the output of science, that impacts then also in career progression, because then these women are not going to be able to obtain tenure or other positions that they need into leading in this. So we really have to take a look at this, and it's really good to celebrate the progress we have made, but we have to see in which areas are we making it, and whether it's enough to make it into an actual integration of diversity into the world of science. And for example, we also see, like in Mexico, that we were given examples, we only see around 1% of indigenous population getting higher education degrees. So where is the inclusion of that? We also have to consider their perspectives and their cosmovision of the world. So those are the parts that we're lacking and that still need a lot of support.
Thank you for your answer. Yeah, so now before moving on to the next question, we would like to hear Atlas answer.
Thank you. I think to put it bluntly, at least in Denmark, the current state is pretty horrendous. There's no other way to put it. I think a lot of work is being done to include women in physics. We had a Women at Niels Bohr conference, or we're trying to organize one a few years ago during lockdown, but unfortunately it was canceled due to not being able to do it in person. But I think it really depends on where you are, because in Denmark, for example, the amount of female students at university is less than 10%, which is terrible. But if you go to Italy or Iran, suddenly it's 50% or more than 50%. But for example, in Iran, there's a majority of women studying physics, but the majority of the people that work as physicists in Iran and have jobs as physicists afterwards are men. So there's also a loss in physicists due to both like cultural situations and just of how things are after university. So I think that what we need to do is not only have affirmative action, which I truly believe in, both for women and for ethnicities and acceptance rates and people with disabilities, but everyone. But we also need to ensure that the people that these people meet when they actually get into university and get into academia actually know what to do. Because it doesn't help that you get accepted into a program through affirmative action if the people that you're meeting don't know how to act. And there are interviews with Black women physics students who've been accepted to university. They got the best grades, but the people that they meet are horrendous. So we need to ensure not only that we get enough people into physics and have affirmative actions, but that the people afterwards that they meet are actually prepared to deal with these people and know how to act and how to be and what to do. So it needs to happen at all stages. So I'm out of time, but it's a longer conversation.
Yeah, thank you for your answer. So let's move on to the next question. So on a personal level, what impact does D&I have on you? Let's start with Rodrigo.
Okay, when I read this answer, I was like, what can I say about this? Because as a person, well, me, I identify as a non-binary person, and this process was while I was in the undergraduate. So this experience is like, how can I help other people that is living that are having these same questions, that don't know how to express, that don't feel comfortable with other people? How can I help them, or how can we make a safe environment for them? So in a personal level, it's like this satisfaction to know that my image that we as panelists here are making an example in our universities, in our laboratories, in all the spaces that we are working, and we are making these new references for other people. So what I most like about these topics is that we can, in order to be safe and to be happy with ourselves, we can also make other people feel the same way. And I have also, how can I say it? When I started to discover myself, I start being more productive in school, for example, or in my laboratories, because I feel comfortable in these spaces. So sharing with my classmates, sharing with my professors, it was easier when I started to accept myself. So this is why I like most about, because it's being more productive as a scientific world. We can be more productive if we promote this diversity, this inclusion. We are all winning from making this inclusion. So that's what I like most about these topics. Thank you.
Yeah, I really liked what you just said. We are all winning. That's for sure. I would like to now hear Dr. Shibukula's answer.
Thank you. So I have to admit that in the United States, in physics, I come from a position of great privilege, right? I'm a man in physics, and I'm of Asian origin, and that's certainly not an underrepresented category of ethnicity in physics in the United States. So in many ways, it took me quite a while, frankly, to understand that this was even an issue that I should be paying attention to. It probably came to me most directly when I had the opportunity to serve as Dean of Undergraduate Studies at Michigan State, and I started to actually look at how well we were doing as an institution in meeting the needs of of individuals, of students from different backgrounds, and whether they were succeeding in our classes in STEM or otherwise. And the disparities were truly shocking. These were all students who were admitted to the university, who were qualified to be at university, but their performance at the university, their ability to succeed and thrive was very, very different, because they came from different groups and they didn't feel, they weren't part of the dominant group perhaps, and they didn't feel comfortable and accepted, as Rodrigo said, and that sense of always being under scrutiny, of always being the other, I think greatly inhibited their ability to succeed. So it became personally important to me to see what we could do to actually address these issues. It became important to me as a instructor, as a teacher in my own classroom. What do I do in order to make sure that all students feel included? And what do I do to create a community among my students so that the students who continue, often, at least in the United States, students continue together. If you teach freshman physics or first year physics to students, they continue in the second year and the third year and the fourth year together. If you can create a community in which the students feel more accepted and able to succeed, then that can last for many years. So that's in the sense in which it became a very personal issue for me.
Thank you for your answer. Let's move on to hear Raquel's answer.
Thank you. Well, on a personal level, as an undergrad student, it was hard not to have role models that were female. That was not the predominant amongst my professors, for example. And I was fortunate enough that my male role models were supportive and inclusive, and actually saw this as an issue and pushed us forward, but that is not always the case. So that is something that we really need to take action on. Also, once I graduated, I started to look at technical jobs, and that there was not availability because they explicitly asked for male candidates, which it was astonishing to see that is still happening 2017, and that it still happens now. It's not as clear, but it still impacts that. And now, being as a young woman in a nuclear field, it's really difficult sometimes breaking into the industry that it's white and male predominant, and also coming from a country that is not necessarily a newcomer, but it's fairly not so traditionally known for the nuclear industry. So it's really difficult to break into that, and takes a lot of additional work that unfortunately doesn't take from other people, that you have to volunteer yourself for extra stuff. You have to push yourself forward for much more stuff. And that also takes a toll on you as an individual. You can do it as willingly as you want, but does takes a toll on you, because that's not something that your counterparts have to do. So they can be much more productive in their other work areas. So I think that, and as a whole, in science particularly, that the lack of diversity affects us all, because then innovation is driven by diversity, and then also the results of science are driven by diversity. So our whole framework is built for target audience that is not necessarily the whole world. Like, we have these mountains of people that are not being catered what they need. Medicines are not catered for the whole population. They're not considered the diversities in needs and bodies. So everything is really impacted by this. And that's how we are all, whether you are in a scientific field or you're not, you're going to be impacted by this lack of diversity.
Thank you, Raquel, for your answer. Let's move on to hear Dr. Mario de Leo's answer.
Thank you. First of all, I think we haven't had the opportunity, or at least myself, to thank you, Melissa and ICPS, for organizing this panel and for putting diversity and equality and inclusion on the table, and sharing this space with Rodrigo, Sekar, Atlas, and Raquel is really a pleasure. I think as a member of the sexual diversity group, if we promote a diverse and inclusive environment, we can create a safer workplace, as has been mentioned here already, a happier working environment, uh, acknowledgement to the group and what they're bringing to the table, and creating community. Personally, at least my work group is diverse in the sexual diversity and the ethnical background and in areas of knowledge too. So I think that union of diverse backgrounds, ideas, areas of expertise creates innovative synergies, knowledge, a sense of belonging, and a richer fulfillment environment where everyone just feels at least more at home, I think, more themselves, so they can express themselves freely, and that the institution itself and the work itself can only benefit out of it. So, uh, I mean, it's a no-brainer, actually.
Thank you for your answer. Let's finish with this question, listening to Atlas' answer.
Thank you. So personally for me, I think it's a lot to do with it's a couple of things, but when you start university in Denmark as in a ratio of 10% women, the rest are men, and people are straight out of high school, and I don't know if everyone here on the panel and everyone else here can remember how we were in high school, but a lot had happened since then. And when you come out of high school in Denmark, it's a lot different from how it is to be at university. And the guys that start university in physics it's for a lot of them, they've gone to a technical high school with basically no women at all. So this is the first time they encounter women in physics and as doing science fields at all in their life. So they have a tendency to not have the best reception of the women in their year and in their class. So when you start as a woman in physics, you have to kind of get past the speed bump of the first 6 months to a year of your bachelor's, where either the guys learn because they encounter women professors, or they drop out because they can't keep up with the fact that there are women in physics. And for some guys, they drop out because they just simply can't cope with the fact that there are women outdoing them in physics. But also recently, because I'm disabled, and when you're disabled and you apply for stuff, in Denmark at least, they're not allowed to sort of outright deny you or like not give you the job because you're disabled, but they will still do it. So recently I was denied a PhD position because I was disabled, even though they did not write out say it. That was still the reason. But I think that like something like that is something that needs to be worked on, but it also in many cases just it's gonna take a long time and it can't be avoided. And I want to finish off by saying that we also need to remember that diversity means different things and people will expect different things of diversity depending on where they're going. So if I from Denmark went to an American university, I would expect to be the diverse person, not because of my gender or my sexuality, but because I'm from Denmark. But for an American, I'm still white. But in Denmark and Europe, sorry, I'm going over time, because we're all white, the diversity in where you're from and that impact is a lot higher than it is in the US. So I will act different depending on where I am. Yeah, okay. Thank you. Sorry for going over time.
Yeah, no worries. It can happen. We still have a bit of time, so it's fine if you would just go over time, a few seconds in order to finish your sentences, is fine. So I would like to encourage our audience to ask your questions. So I see some of the questions in the chat. So there's one question from Enrique. Enrique Iñiguez. So he says, is there a way us as individuals can push for more participation of underrepresented groups in scientific discussion, or should we focus on collective actions? I would like to hear Dr. Chibucula's answer.
So the answer to either this or that is yes, both. Both are required. I think that it is important, even as students, to understand that you do have some power and ability yourselves within the classroom to create your community, to be an ally of other students in the classroom. To note, there's a classic example for that we talk about certainly in physics, where there'll be a group discussion and the women will say something, or a woman will say something, and it will be ignored, and then a man will say the same thing and get credit for having said it. There are simple things that you can do to simply acknowledge that this comment was actually made by a woman first. For example, you can ally, you can, even when you are not necessarily in a position of power in the classroom, you have the ability to create and help make a community. That said, it is certainly true that as a group, students together have power within their department and within their university, different power and different ways of doing it in different places. In our institution, we have a physics graduate council, for example, that to which issues can be brought that then can be raised with departmental administration or departmental committees and hopefully addressed, and if they don't address them, with the dean perhaps or other administrators at the university. And then through professional organizations or through conferences like this, you can learn and create a community of people interested in the same kinds of issues. That community, as you grow, the people that you are in class with now will be your colleagues 20 years from now, and perhaps director of various institutes. And so you have an ability to make change. We do sometimes say, unfortunately, that in academia, change happens one retirement at a time. It can be a long process, so you do need to be engaged over the long term. But friends, allies, and partners in that are really important. So I hope that gives some sense of an answer to the question.
Thank you. We would like to hear Dr. Mario De Leo's answer.
Just very quick, I agree with everything that Sakar said, but I would suggest starting big, but starting small, but thinking big, right? So try to start with a few people, but very well organized. Make yourself seen, and you will see that how people adhere to having actions that would promote inclusion, equality, and diversity, right? So, and also be consistent and patient, right? Because it won't happen overnight. You need to convince a lot of people, as particular decision makers. So just be consistent. Don't give up, and it will start solving itself as you create actions with groups.
Thank you. We would like to hear Raquel's answer.
Thank you. Be really quick as well, because I also agree with what was said before. It's definitely a combined action between the individual. What can I do? And ask yourself, am I integrating my peers? Am I making an effort to hear everyone's voices and make them feel comfortable and addressing their needs? Maybe there is some people that are less vocal. So am I making a space for, like, for example, quiet feedback or one-on-ones, so like stuff like that. Also, I think on our research, we can always integrate more voices by questioning ourselves. Am I considering authors with diversity as well? In some fields, it's quite difficult, but if we don't start questioning, am I even making this effort, then it will be much more difficult. Then we will still go back to the same people, to the same authors, which makes it, again, less diverse. So like trying to integrate that, trying to make communities definitely something that works for everyone. And then we need to go to these organizations, make networks, connect with people, and actually pull our peers and say, let's make a community, let's push for these issues and raise them. If we don't vocalize them, and sometimes it's quite scary to be the one that vocalizes it, but if we don't vocalize them, then they start being set aside and then start not being important. So we need to actually be much more active. And then if we hear or see something that we don't agree with, we just try and raise our voices, try and make a point of making a difference or being different from what we don't agree with. And then that's how we can start a movement and inspire others as well, and make others know that they can trust us with these issues as well, depending on whether we're the one holding the privilege or not. But then we have to kind of have that self-reflection, which is hard but important to have.
Thank you, Raquel, for your answer. We would like to hear Rodrigo's answer.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Enrique, for this amazing question. Of course, I agree that we have to get involved in both dimensions of participation. As an individual, we have to learn and mainly listen others' histories and necessities, and well, what other people are living, because if they are the ones that are suffering or the ones that are noticing these differences, we have to listen and start to create with them what we can do to change this. And as a community or as a collective, I participated 2 years ago in the co-foundation of a student organization. So we have to believe in this power of community. Even though we are students, we can organize ourselves, we can make our demands, we can get involved in these political processes, and we have also voices that we can make them hear. So we have to make also these alliances with people that have this power, because we also need the directives, our professors to get involved with those who want to, and then we can get to creatively involve the other ones. So I will encourage you to make this movement in your university, to create these groups. First, start listening you with each others, and then you can make this list of things as you see. I have to, well, we as a community or as a student community, we need this, and we can take this paper to our directives, and we have to ask them for answers, for actions. We can have this power. So believe in yourself and the power that you have as a community, and encourage it. So that's what that I will tell you. Thank you.
Thank you for your answer. Before moving on to the next question, which is also coming from the audience, let's hear Atlas' answer.
Thank you. So I think it's for I agree with what everyone else on the panel has said. I think it's a really good action to take. I want to add that it's also it's important to do self-reflection, because I think in many cases there are some biases that we accidentally enforce that we're not aware of. If you're, or for example, if you're a man or a white man, and you're used to being in a room with just other men or just other white people, you might not notice at all that just because you're acting the way that you normally act, that you're accidentally ignoring other people in the room and overseeing the inclusion of someone else. But you don't think that you're necessary, because you're not necessarily doing something bad or mean. You're acting the way that you usually do when you're used to being in a room with other white people or other straight people or other men, or regardless of the situation, right? So you just kind of forget. And I think it's important to do that self-reflection and realize with yourself if you have a tendency to do this. I know in some cases I have a tendency to do this, and I have to work with myself to be more aware of when I do this, and I have to sort of sometimes take myself in doing something like that. And I think that's important to do. And the second thing is that I think it's great to have organizations like student organizations or groups and committees at universities that do a lot of work both within themselves, and they get rules set in place on like organizational level. But as I think I mentioned with an earlier question, it's really important to also educate people and give people an opportunity to educate themselves as well. So when you put these rules in place, it's also important to sort of it kind of seems obvious, but tell people why that they're there, and help people realize within themselves that they're accidentally reinforcing a rule or the reason why this rule is in place. There's also saying that because we have stuff like sexual harassment classes in companies that sort of help people realize when something is happening and whatnot, how not to do it, and realize when you're doing it and preventing it. And we need similar things for other situations like anti-racism classes, anti-discrimination classes, anti-homophobia classes, etc. Because in many cases, we're just not aware that we're doing it. And we need to be helped to do the work to realize that we're doing it. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for your answers. So I would like to point out here that in the chat, Jan Charf, he just shared a link. He says, I would like to again promote this event for inspiring women in physics, and he sent a link. And I think this fits the discussion. If you want to take a look, feel free to click the link. So there's another question in the chat that I would like to address. So Achal Binod says, thanks for this wonderful panel discussion. My question is, what mechanisms can be opted by individuals, organizations who are victims of such discrimination even in 2022 in various parts of the world, particularly when the education system of a country is focused towards quantity instead of quality of research in general? I would like to start the answers by hearing Rodrigo's answer.
Okay, well, this is a complicated answer because, oh, well, it's like frustrating, mainly in Mexico, that is where I live and that I've been working. This complaint process where you get to these, to the people that are in charge of these complaints, these processes are new here in Mexico, mainly, and they are still changing because they have been that they have said that they re-victimize the person that is making this complaint, and it's still very frustrating because you cannot have it's not practical, it's very demanding. So we have to be first very patient with this because it's something that it's still creating, that it's still moving. So what I will suggest is that you ally or that you approach to these other organizations that are outside your university or your workspace that work with these processes. I mean, here in Mexico, for example, there are a lot of organizations of activisms that work with these people and that accompany them. So I will suggest that you approach to them in order to make this noise and also as a community to demand that these processes are, that we are always making them better, because we need them to be efficient, to be easier, to be accessible, and then all people know how to access them. So we have to, as a community, demand this to our directives. And when you need this process, you can approach to these other organizations that have been working with them a little bit time earlier, so you can have a better answer from them, and you can feel well, they can give a better company to the people that are living this process. So I will suggest that to approach to other organizations that are working with these topics.
Thank you for your answer. We would like to now hear Dr. Chibukula's answer.
Well, thank you. I've been thinking about this. This is a very complicated question, as Rodrigo said. I should say this is very, very locally context dependent. And I guess one general statement I would make is that, sometimes as physicists, we neglect or don't understand the importance of political science or sociology. And I think that this is one of these cases where you need to understand the power dynamics, the administrative structure, the milieu that you're in. And I really couldn't say in general what are the right steps that will allow you to feel safe and heard at the same time. And so this is something that I would start probably by asking other students, who have perhaps students who have been through the program or been in the program for a number of years. As you are able to make allies on a personal level with, say, postdoctoral associates or with faculty, try to understand the lay of the land. It can even be dependent within a given classroom with different instructors. Different instructors may be open to different kinds of approaches. Some instructors, I'd like to believe, although I'm not sure my students would always agree, that I'm open to, they're simply coming and telling me I did something wrong and they really wish I would do something about it. But I don't know that they would all agree with that. But there are ways. Different people have different ways to be approached. I think the thing I would caution against is, again, as I say, one size fits all, because I think certain actions which may be safe in one context may not even be safe in a different one. And so I feel like I'm punting on this question. I apologize, but that's I think what I would say to start.
Thank you for your answer. And it's nice to hear that you worry about your students in case they take classes with you next fall. Okay, so let's move on to hear Raquel's answer.
Thank you. As it was stated before, it's a really challenging question because it's pretty situational, and I think it's really difficult to put this emotional charge into the person that's already suffering the discrimination, and it's challenging depending on the situation, on the place where they find themselves, on the networks they can build. But I think that's the key. If the person feels comfortable enough to act upon this, and that they have the tools, emotional or framework wise, or whatever tool they need to act on it, they should always network, because that's going to be key for finding other people that are either suffering from the same issue or finding this an issue, and then from that can take on action and make a movement or make something for this. So always network between, like, not only from the people from your program or from your field or everything, but also with people that have other visions and might integrate something else into it. As Dr. Chibukula was saying, sometimes people with science, in the sense of hard science degrees, tend to not perhaps look at people with political science degrees, and these things overlap because at the end we are living in an anthropocentric world where we need these interactions, and we also need science to be much more diverse in that sense, not only in the sense of people doing the science, but in their perspective, and it has to be much more holistic. So we really need to network, and if the person feels comfortable enough to act upon this, that would be my recommendation. And well, as well, when your system is focused on quantity instead of quality, that would be the key as well. You know, like if you build a network and you can start raising these issues and start building upon how or why should we focus much more on quality instead of just producing quantity, then you can work on this. It is a really challenging task for one person to take on alone, and unfortunately, the frameworks don't allow for this. It's not something one individual can do. So that would be the key.
Thank you for your answer. Let's hear Dr. Mario de Leo's answer.
Again, I agree that it has to do with your local environment, but I do have to say that file a complaint. If you have been discriminated against, file a complaint. We are not educated to complain when we're being discriminated. So we need to start that culture of filing complaints. You need to be aware that you might be re-victimized, that it won't necessarily go as you want, but file a complaint. We need to start with that. On the second part of your question on focusing towards quantity above quality, that doesn't necessarily, it does have to do with inclusion and diversity, but not necessarily. I do have to make a point because I was the director of the National System of Researchers that does the peer reviewing of 35,000 researchers in Mexico. And although institutions and governments want more quantity than quality, it was the same scientists in the evaluation committees that said, we don't have time to read the papers to look for quality. We want only quantity, quarters, impact factors, and citations. And that doesn't necessarily work. So it is the same community that is putting the brakes on quality above quantity. And what we need to do as newer generations of scientists is to push for evaluations on quality. Push, also organize, request it and require it and demand it from our institutions. And that's the only way we're going to move the status quo. There are older generations that will try to force this against us, but it's only organized younger scientific communities that can push this agenda for quality above quantity.
Thank you. Thank you for your answer. Atlas, are you available now to answer the question? Yes. Okay, then you can go. You can go ahead.
Yes. Sorry for I had to take a short break. But I think first off, I just will have to slightly disagree with what Dr. De Leo just said about filing a complaint. Because I think in the current state of where equity, diversity, and inclusion is right now, filing a complaint, depending on where you are, one is not going to do a whole lot. And as Dr. Leo mentioned, you're going to end up re-victimizing yourself, and you're not going to get the outcome that you want. So what we're basically asking people to do is to put the responsibility on them to re-victimize themselves and suffer through it again, rather than take action beforehand. Because in these systems where you have a complaint file like system like this, nothing is going to happen, and we know that nothing is going to happen. And if you're in a university where you know that nothing is going to happen, asking someone to file a complaint when you know nothing is going to happen, you're saying, "Oh, well, that's your problem," instead of taking it up and being like, hey, maybe we should try and do something outside of the complaint system when you know that it doesn't work. Because at least in my case, when I knew that I got rejected from a PhD position because of my disability, I didn't file a complaint because there was no point in filing a complaint. Once it takes, for once, it takes 6 weeks for it to process, and by that point, the position would have already been filled. So there's no point in filing a complaint, even if they're like, oh yeah, that was wrong, because they wouldn't have had a good outcome. And two, it was just not going to do anything. So rather, it's going to things like this and taking up the discussion of what else we can do, because complaint systems as we are right now simply don't work. I'm really sorry for that, but with my last time, I will say something else. I think, as I mentioned earlier, it's about education, and it's about making sure that people are educated, and in a system where it's quantity over quality, it's also on the older generation of researchers to step back and say, actually, we're in a position of having been in the field long enough to take the hit of saying we would rather focus on quality over quantity. But if you're a new researcher, you're not in that position. You don't have that extra mileage, so to say, to go on to say quality over quantity. So I think it's up to the older generation of physicists to drive a bit of change. Just a bit of a different view.
Thank you. Thank you for your answer. So let's move on to the proposed questions by me. So question number 4. I guess it's kind of related to what we are just saying, but what successful initiatives or best practices has your institution identified concerning diversity and inclusion issues in science? I would like to start with Raquel's answer.
Well, thank you for that question. Yeah, I definitely agree. This question ties back to what we have been discussing in the sense. For example, I think we go back to the presentation in the organization where I work for. We really work for representation, and not only in young women, but also on kids, because that's a key point where some people start making decisions, where people start discouraging, for example, young women, telling them, oh, you're maybe not so good at math, or maybe you shouldn't be inclined to this, or those are not careers or things that girls should be doing. So representation, again, comes as an important part on how are we leading this in diversity and inclusion. Well, we should start as well young, and also working with the people surrounding them, making the younger generations sure that they are going to have the support, that they're not going to be discouraged once they take the decision to, for example, study physics, that their families are not going to say, well, if you want to study that, then find yourself a way to do so, you know. And then it also ties back to something Atlas mentioned earlier. It's not only about getting people to these fields, but also being able to retain them, making sure they actually manage to finish these degrees, and they actually manage to succeed in these degrees. What's happening is that, yeah, we have so many countries that actually get a broad array of people into these degrees, but then they don't actually work in this field. They don't have an action field for it. And even when they do, they will stay again in lower positions because there are no frameworks. So I think, well, from my institution, what we're working mostly is in the representation, and then providing a support network once you're in there for you to be able to succeed, whether it's making connections, or even sometimes it's about hearing the problem the person has, which kind of ties back with the complaint. I could see both points, that it is important to make a stance, and that's why it's important to complain, but I could also see the point of feeling re-victimized and not wanting to complain because that has repercussions. So that's when a network comes in, and then if the person feels able to do so, then we can move forward. But if they don't feel like they can in their position do. So then as a network, you can still push for this progress to be done without necessarily having the individual repercussions. So those are the areas where we're mainly focusing on.
Thank you for your answer. So just here, I would like to add that Achal Binod, who made the previous question, he says, thanks so much for those wonderful insights. Really appreciate for understanding and sharing various aspects regarding this issue. So let's move on. And let's hear Rodrigo's answer for question number 4.
Okay, well, this will be strange, but as a community in Mexico and UNAMS, we have done nothing really. We are way back in our, as I mentioned at the beginning, we are way back in these topics. We have made, well, UNAM have made this coordination for gender equality. They have made this first diagnosis, but that's all. No, we have to continue these actions to look forward for these processes, to make them better, to make people realize that these issues are important. So well, one of the initiatives or these practices that I applaud most is the is one that I participate in, is the Gender Equality Facilitators Program. They formed us in gender perspective and equality during a diploma of 1 year, and we as students and recent graduated, we are going to facilitate these courses or these these courses to bachelor degree students. So it's like involving your community in order to make your community more inclusive. So this is one of the best actions that they have made to involve your community in order to participate, to organize themselves, to make their community better. But we are way back in these issues, and in science, it's a topic that we don't talk about it. This is because these coordinations are directed, or are well, the persons that are behind these projects are people that come from social sciences, from different backgrounds, that from areas of STEM are still not involved in these topics. So we have to make a lot of work here. For example, in Mexico, in UNAMS, that is the one that I know. So that will be the answer. We have a lot to work.
Yeah, I do agree. There's a lot of work to do still. I would like to hear Dr. Mario De Leo's answer.
Thank you. So I was a graduate student from Rodrigo's University, and I completely agree that that university has done very poor actions for best practices. Now I'm at the third largest public university in Mexico, the Metropolitan Autonomous University, and it has been successful in inclusion and diverse practices. For example, just to give you an example, a current thing that they're promoting in social media is how you can change your gender in official documents of the university. So they've been doing this, promoting how you can do it. So I think that's a step forward, just to give you an example. And there's a university's office on the rights of students and academics and administrative personnel, where complaints can be filled, where they can be followed. There's a central office and there's sister offices, because we have 5 campuses. And there's a strong lawyer group that helps people who have filed a complaint. There are protocols against discrimination of minority groups. There are courses that we're required to take. There are seminars and work groups and culture and scientific activities that include diversity. And there are some horizontal dialogic practices to get to know and understand and intake the requirements of specific groups. but there is, I mean, those are small actions. So there is so much to be done still to reduce discrimination, to stop harassment, to sanction harassment, to have affirmative action for indigenous peoples, to be more open with LGBT plus groups. So, I mean, some has been done. I think this particular university has done the most at the Mexican level, but there's still a lot to be done in Mexico and in other countries worldwide. Another thing Another thing that I think is missing in particular in Mexico is, for example, the protocol for what is it called? Oh my God, an American university says chapter, no, it's not a chapter, Dr. Sakar, when somebody files a complaint.
Oh, you know, I mean, discrimination, Title IX?
A Title IX. Thank you so much. A Title IX. Title IX in the United States can be filed anonymously. So even if a procedure isn't started, at least you have a red flag where things are happening. And in Mexico, you cannot do anonymous complaints. And that is the thing that must be, I think, universal. And it says that at least red flags are waiting somewhere, that something is happening. If there are some complaints, some formal complaints, then you can start a formal investigation. But at least a red flag helps to understand where actions need to be taken. But in Mexico in particular, anonymous complaints cannot be filed, and that's a big no-no, at least in my book. We should work for that.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Mario De Leo. We are going to listen to Dr. Tibucula's answer.
Thank you. Just a few things maybe to highlight based on what the co-panelists have already said. So I think implicit in a lot of the answers, but we should probably make explicit, is that academic institutions are very hierarchical. And so the most successful initiatives have some relationship or sponsorship of leadership in the university. If that leadership is open to dialogue and to change, that's the most likely to be able to produce some change over time, because of the way that academic organizations are organized. And I think implicit in Dr. De Leo's comments also were, you know, if the government has certain laws or practices that it then requires universities to follow, taking advantage of those is also important. The more complicated question is, you know, what do you do from the ground up, right? What do you do as a student? What do you do as a junior researcher, as a junior faculty member, where you are still in many ways vulnerable to that power hierarchy, that disparity of power? So we've talked a lot about building communities, building allyship, so that you're not taking on these issues alone. I think that's really important. But I think that you can also find allies among faculty, but you may have to choose your topics. You know, what is it that your professors or senior faculty that are most interested in, and how can they help? And that takes some time and some organization to root out. Another thing that hasn't been mentioned that I think is important is finding metrics, especially for diversity. Even just tracking the number, say, of women that are in a department over time, and making sure that those statistics are known and revisited frequently can be a powerful tool over time to actually perhaps make change. But it's still, you know, if people don't want to look at these numbers, it can be very hard to make people look at something they don't want to hear. Finally, you know, I think especially in the United States, we spend a lot of time thinking about hiring processes, trying to understand how to change hiring processes to make them more inclusive, how to give especially faculty hiring committees training on best practices to avoid bias in searches. I think that's had some impact, but really it needs to be reinforced by leadership as well. I mean, a committee changes every year, and if leadership in the department doesn't say, you know, it really is important that we have a diverse pool of candidates and we consider a range of possible candidates for a position, it's very easy for people to default to say, well, I'll go with the person that looks like me. So maybe that's a depressing note to end on, but I'll stop there.
Yeah, thank you for your answer. Let's hear now Atlas's reply.
Yep. So I want to note a couple of things, I think. At a university in Copenhagen, the Niels Bohr Institute, or generally the whole university, I think one of the things that the university has really done well is that there's a really strong accessibility department. So if you have special needs of any form, and you go to university, there's a really active and open and easily accessible department that will help you out. And one of the things that I would like to point out about this is that if you have ADHD or you're autistic, which I don't know if this is the case everywhere, but at least in Denmark, I think it's about 20-30% of all physicists are either autistic or have ADHD or both, or some combination thereof. There are some things that you require for extra help, like extra time in exams, or just time sort of help managing your calendar and getting a better overview of what your study year actually looks like. And what my university offers is tutors, but not in like sort of the traditional sense of help with how to do the classes and how to do the homework, but it is former students or students who are longer in the year that know how the courses are structured and which things in the course are important to remember and what courses to take. That will sort of help answer questions from students and guide them. Because it can be really hard to sort of recognize which bit of a course is important and which bit to read and when to read them if you haven't been through it before. And it's even harder if you're autistic or you have ADHD and just simply can't sit down and concentrate and focus and recognize what to prioritize. So one of the things that my uni does is to help people do this. But other than that, I don't think my uni does that a whole lot, diversity inclusion wise. I think that's about it. But I also work with the International Association of Physics Students. I'm on the executive committee of that, as a member of the alumni manager. And last year we introduced accessibility guidelines, which is like a brief set of guidelines for conferences and online, and it was about 3 pages. This year we're updating them after a lot of work. So now they've gone from 3 pages to 20 pages to sort of help bring in more inclusion, and hopefully next year we can get grants to help people pay for all to get the money to provide all the things that we want to provide people. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your reply. So next question is gonna be the final question. And let's see. So the question number 5 says, how do you do EDI work in science organizations that don't pick it up so quickly or have some resistance? Let's start this question with Raquel.
I thank you for that question. I think it again circles back to what we have been discussing. It's starting from small actions that can have a global or a larger impact. But I know it's frustrating to sometimes work in organizations that don't pick up on things quickly or that actually present resistance. But small actions can always lead to a larger impact, and you need to have patience as well. Also, something that is really important is to talk about things. Organizing this type of events, it's a great action because we don't see what we don't name. And then that ties back to what Dr. Shikula was saying about numbers. If we don't know where is the problem, we cannot address it. So we need to start having numbers on where are we in terms of diversity? How are we working into including people? What are the needs? And actually asking those tough questions for us to realize there is a problem, or where we have been actually maybe unconsciously been working well, you know, because there is some areas that might have worked well and that you don't necessarily recognize unless you start asking these questions. So that is the work that we need to start doing. And it's bit by bit in these type of organizations, but if we don't mention it and we continue to push it, and then even if sometimes we feel like we're being obnoxious or repetitive, it has to be done, because otherwise things are not going to change and they're not going to take any momentum if we leave them aside. I think that's the most important thing in this type of environments. And even though you feel frustrated, I think that's why communities are so important, because an individual themselves can start getting frustrated when they try to push for these and nothing happens. But if you get the sense of a community, and then more people start to push on it, and then you start raising the question in different forums where it might not have been brought up, then some change starts to lead. So I think that would be my answer to that.
Thank you, Raquel, for your answer. We would like to hear Dr. Mario de Leo's reply.
Again, I think I touched this before in another answer, but if there's resistance within the institution, I would start with small groups, declare small victories, because you need to be seen also. You need to show how it benefits to have a diverse and a rich working environment. There's so many benefits. It has been thoroughly discussed here. So you need to showcase that. But as Raquel just said, it's be persistent, be intelligent on how you do it, and be patient. I mean, this takes time, but it will eventually bring greater goods. So with patience come the victories.
Thank you. I do agree. Let's hear Atlas's reply.
Okay. Absolutely agree with what Dr. De Leo just said. I just want to add one small thing, which is that in many cases, even if the science organization that you're working with are not doing anything within the EDI, there will be either a larger or an equivalent organization that has already done this type of work. And a very easy thing to do is to just refer to them and say, hey, these guys are doing it. Maybe we should do it too. Or it's very successful for these people. We should do it too. There's also countries that will have done something like that. So when I was looking into accessibility guidelines, for example, it's kind of hard to justify why you need accessibility guidelines just off the bat without a referral. But the US has the ADA guidelines, which are a set of laws for accessibility in the US, and the EU has a set of laws for accessibility in the US. So you can say that, oh, these, like the EU and the US have things that they require people to do and for companies to offer, then maybe we as an organization should take a look at that and try and adopt some of those changes as well. So in many cases, even if your own organization is a bit stubborn, you can start small, like Dr. De Leo said, and then like refer to work done by others that has been successful. And usually that will help drive the change, because a lot of these people, they don't want to be the last person or the last organization to do this change. They also don't want to be the first, but they don't want to be the last. So it's a good way of doing it.
Thank you for your answer. Let's move on and hear Rodrigo's answer.
Yes, I do agree with my co-panelist. It will be an exhausting process. You have to be patient with it. And as they said, you have to identify others, your peers that are these diverse peers which you can talk with them, you can collaborate, you can accompany yourselves. And that will be like the first step, make this community for just I don't know, to go to the cafeteria and talk a little bit in your interest, and then you can start with this creativity to know what we can do, being intelligent, as they said, being intelligent, identify which are your which can be your allies, or these things, but they will be born in these talks, in the cafeteria, in your classes. You have to start speaking with other people, and that will be the first step. Then identifying these other people and creating this community in order to start making this an issue in your workspace. And then when you start with that, you can go with this sensitization and diagnosis that also they mentioned. Start saying we need this, but first we have to speak with others and with our peers. So that will be what I will do in a space like that.
Awesome. Thank you for your answer. Finally, we would like to hear Dr. Ishibukula's answer.
Thank you. So yes, I certainly agree with everything that's been said. I would make two points. One is, I think we should acknowledge that we sometimes have a special problem of dealing with diversity in science because of our dedication to, or our belief that we are a pure meritocracy, that we somehow can evaluate people objectively and make an unbiased judgment of their worth. And of course, the problem is we're used to making those kinds of judgments about scientific work, about scientific issues, and we, I think, improperly often just assume that since we can make those judgments about some sort of equation or some sort of objective scientific fact, that we can necessarily do the same thing in social interactions or in judging the merits of an individual. So the problem is we often, this is actually, judging merit is hard, and we often take shortcuts in doing it. It's in those shortcuts that we often get tripped up. So we all know a colleague, we all have a colleague who is not always right, but is never uncertain. And that sense of confidence is something that we often view as, something that a scientist should have. And even if they're not right, we often give them that benefit of a doubt. And that tends to be typically a white male or an Asian male physicist, because they feel comfortable displaying their opinions in that way. So we need to think specifically about merit and about excellence and how we judge it, and make sure in our conversations that we try to broaden the considerations that people are bringing into the discussion, into the mix, in order to discuss it. It's a hard thing to do. But to end on a more positive note, I think we should also think about positive things that we should do, not just accentuate the negative. We're trying to change culture, right? And culture is not just changing individual people's minds about an issue like diversity, but also convincing them that when they change their mind, other people will agree with them and won't say that what they're saying is wrong, right? So it's a complicated social network question that we have to answer. And one of the things that we can do to change culture are positive things. When people do things that are reflective of increasing diversity in our field, we need to celebrate them. We need to announce them. We need to make sure that people know and feel like they're getting credit for it. That's something that we can do within our organizations, even if it's just the students deciding that a particular faculty member did a great job and want to give a pizza party for them. Something that is a visual, a visible demonstration that they appreciate the work that that person has done. Maybe can encourage other people to do similar kinds of things, or it's something that we can do in our professional organizations. I think Atlas mentioned, using other institutions as an example in order to do it. This is a similar kind of an issue. Other institutions have these positive reward systems as well, and that's one of the things that we should try to use in our benefit to try to make change.
Yeah, for sure. Before finishing our session, I would like to encourage our audience to speak up. You can open your mic if you wanna make a comment before finishing the session. Okay, it seems like we have no comments. Okay, well, I would like to say congratulations to everyone here in the panel. I feel so happy to like have these spaces where people, students, particularly in physics, can feel safe, so they can share their experiences and at least like me, like learning new information, because sometimes we are very ignorant when we talk about all these topics, and it's really good for us to get to know about experiences, about different methods to get this equity, inclusion, and diversity in our environments. Because at the end of the day, we all work together in the same workspaces, and so we have to know how to share our spaces, right? Thank you to the panelists for being here today. Thank you for your answers. And so I would like to announce that now we are going to have a break, a 1 hour break for all the participants. And then we are going to come back at, now it's 4, so at 5 p.m. For our next guest speaker, Dr. Eric Vasquez, who is going to talk about underground neutrino experiments. So make sure to join us. And again, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you all.
See you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.